Okay, my name is Cynthia, and Melinda and I started the very same day. We were on that line outside. I got a phone call and said, they're starting the line. So this was Wednesday night. We all crammed into somebody's pickup truck and went there and put out our sleeping bags. I still remember my number 25 on the line. And what they would do is that they would come down the line and say, where's number 25? So we would tell whoever was with us on the line and say, listen, I've gone to the bathroom, the coffee shop, so if they come looking for me, come get me. Okay, so even back then we were organizing, even on the streets of Flushing. And there were men that came up to us and told us that we were not entitled to do that because they were men and they needed jobs for their family. And I said, you know, what makes you think that we don't have to support ourselves? You know, so that was the beginning of that dialogue, if you will, between that person later on I met as a business agent in my union. But anyhow, there are only really two jobs that I know of where biological sex is a criteria. Only men can be sperm donors. Okay, that's it. Only women can be surrogate mothers. Okay, those are the only two occupations that I know of where sex is a biological criteria. Other than that, it shouldn't be. Okay, and one of the reasons that I am so crazed about toilet facilities on the job with a locking mechanism on the inside is because one of the first jobs that I was on, it was an outdoor job, working on a Con Ed facility, and they had the outdoor porta sands. I had to go. So I had to disrobe because I had like all these layers. So I left a mountain of clothing in front of the porta sand. And of course the porta sand didn't quite close all the way. There was nothing to latch. There was no interior latch. And so out of the crack, I could see this guy making tracks. And at the construction site, it's loud, it's noisy. So I'm yelling, I'm in here, somebody's in here. You know, he obviously did not hear. He just grabbed that door and yanked the door, and I went out, you know, holding the door, trying to keep him from pulling me out, but he pulled me out, and then he just was like, he blanched and ran away. And then from then on, I've been like fighting for toilet facilities ever since. So this is one of the reasons why I, in particular, fight for toilet facilities on the job. The other thing that I fight about is the pornographic graffiti, because I think that it really creates a hostile work environment. It creates an unnecessary, polluted, sexualized environment. So imagine every time that you have to go ring for the elevator, assuming that the elevators are running in this building at this time, somebody has done this nice graffiti of a woman with her legs spread, and so every time you have to push the button, you're touching her clitoris, okay? So I'm guessing, you know, maybe the guys are really having a good time about this, but every time that this happens, and we complain. So we go through the channels. We go to our shop steward. If there's not a shop steward, we talk to our foreman, you know, and up the line. And then the electrical foreman really doesn't want to bring this up to the general contractor, so more times than not, the women themselves have to be the ones to advocate for ourselves. So it becomes a very, you know, especially as an apprentice, it becomes a very untenable situation that every time you're on the job site, there's things that just are so offensive to you. And one of the things I learned is you have to pick and choose your battles. You know, so there were some times that you let some of that stuff go and other times that you don't, you know, and a lot of it just was, did you have the support from other people or not? Most of the time, we had to rely on our sister electricians because it was very rare that I found men who sympathized or even had any clue about this. And Francine, I have to say, I wish you had written this book before I started so that I would have understood what was going on, because I used to go home and say, why are they so hostile to me? I try to be a nice person. I try to, do what they want, and it's like, I was so clueless, and I would be like so devastated and emotionally upset all the time about, and that's part of the stress, about why were they so hostile to me. And I was an apprentice, and I was assigned to was a terracotta building, and so we were chopping out and putting BX inside the terracotta. So the journeyman who was working with me, he would come over to me, I'd be on the top of a 12-foot A-frame ladder, and he'd come over and he'd say, you know, I was dreaming about you last night. And I would say, stop right there, I don't want to hear it. And he says, no, really, it's good, it's good. I said, no, I really don't need to hear it. And he would like persist. I mean, this kept going on, and it was not just the first time. So since I had been chopping with a hammer, I was like, whoops, my hammer went flying down, and whoops, it just missed him. And in the meantime, I was like so upset, I really didn't know what to do. So what I did is I picked up the phone, I went to the payphone. This was before cell phones. Went downstairs, 10 floors, went to the payphone and called a friend of mine who worked in an office and said, listen, on your calendar, write down that I called you today at such and such a time, because I just had this horrible thing, and I don't know if this guy is going to report me to the union and whether they're going to throw me out or not. But just write, make notes for me, okay? And that was the only thing that we had back then. You know, we did, as Melinda said, we did go to the union, we did organize, we did try to present our position to the union, and we were always trying to find a way, because, you know, ultimately, we were really young, and we were so full of hope. We wanted to succeed. We wanted to learn our craft. We wanted to learn our trade. We wanted to be really good at it. And on top of that, we wanted to help our unions. But it felt that we were being rebuffed at every turn. And back then, you know, we didn't know how to better deal with it than what we did. You know, during those early years as apprentices, we really felt let down by our unions, because I had gone to Cornell, Trade Union Women's Studies. That's the intersection with Cornell, and there I learned, you know, what a shop steward's supposed to do, what a union's supposed to be doing, and why we care that unions exist or don't exist, all that sort of stuff, because I come from a family of rabid Republicans. So it was through Cornell Trade Union Women's Studies that I learned what our unions were supposed to be doing. And one of the key things that I learned was they had the duty to fairly represent us. In exchange for taking our union dues, they were supposed to represent us with our employers. But often it felt that that was not the case, because of the social interaction between the foreman on the job, the shop steward on the job. We were not part of that equation at all. And when we went into this trade, a lot of it was due to the fact that there was that executive order, 11246, which was a federal executive order that grew out of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And I think that our government, city, state, and federal government, let us down. I cannot tell you how many women who, upon, most of the time the women keep slogging along, keep getting up and going to work, until finally one day something happens on the job and they say, that's it, you put my back up against the wall and I'm not going to take it anymore. And when women get to that point, that's when they want to file the lawsuit. Okay, and when they file the lawsuit, they go to the federal EEOC, they go to the New York State Division of Human Rights, or they go to the New York City Commission on Human Rights. Okay, every time that women from construction have gone to any of these agencies, although people as individuals will be very sympathetic to us, they'll say, oh, this is terrible. I think that 9 times out of 10, the best that we can get out of these agencies is the right to sue letter. Every woman that I know of who's gone, and it's very painful, it's emotionally painful, it's gut-wrenching to have to do this. Because, so many of us believe as trade unionists, we don't want to be putting our unions in this position, but we also feel that our unions have put us in this position, that we have had no recourse, that we have tried to cooperate, we've tried to, work within the internal means of, internal procedure of the union to make changes, and we've been rebuffed. So, we felt that we really only had each other and our organizing, and our families, some of our families were supportive of us. And so we went back to the community organizing that we knew as women, which is you get a clipboard, a paper, pen and pencil, you go around, and for the women electricians, we found each other in the bathroom at school. Because after you walk through the gauntlet of 18th Street to get to Charles Evans Hughes High School, you know, where the guys are like kind of catcalling all the women that come down the street. They're not catcalling you because they recognize you're a worker, because your shoes have all the sheetrock dust on them. So they, you know, so to kind of escape, we go up into the building and went to the women's bathroom, and that's kind of where we found each other. And so from there, we did actively organize, and so then we started to get a little more slick as time goes on. So instead of having all these little pieces of paper that you're writing and scribbling on, we went with calling cards so that you could get that information to somebody quickly. And also, like on the job, you don't have time to fumfer around and look for the paper, the scrap of paper. So this way you get the information to whoever quickly, effectively, efficiently. The other thing that we used was postcards. And this is an example of the postcard that we use. And part of what we do is we're trying to also advocate for civil rights, for things that are beyond the scope of,
So do you want me to give these out?
Well, this is just a sample. I mean, it doesn't, if people want to see it, they're welcome to it. I think that many unions would have killed for activist members such as ourselves. We spent so many weekends, times together, you know, writing out postcards, mailing them, you know, doing all kinds of things, trying to be active in our union in a good and positive way. But what we missed, unfortunately, is what's very much in this book. The culture that we were not privy to, that we didn't know about. And the daughters of electricians, the grandchildren of electricians, they kind of knew better. We didn't. We were kind of ignorant and we didn't know better, and we offended a lot of people, apparently. But the institutional barriers are hard to break down. The racism, they did make an attempt at it because they did try to bring men of color in, Hispanic men, but they did it in a very carefully orchestrated way. And I think that they brought women in the same way. And I think that rather than sacrificing their daughters or granddaughters, they brought in people who were complete strangers. So if it was going to blow up, let it not be one of their daughters or granddaughters to suffer. And because after we kind of got in and tried to establish a certain level of professionalism, I think that some of the men did start to say, okay, I could see it could be okay for my daughter to come in. It might be okay. One of the biggest things is, you know, is that the gender discrimination is something that's going to be has to be really worked at in order to be changed. And unless and until they make the decision to fully integrate women and people of color in the union, it's still going to be a union with all these layers of, you know, the Greek Orthodox Club, the Catholic Council, the, you know, the Allied Club, you know, all these different clubs, which creates layers. And for some people, that club organization really helps. It did not help us because we were not part of it. We didn't know how to connect to it. And I think that with 20/20 hindsight, if I knew then what I know now, I would never have done this. I have to be completely honest. It's been so gut-wrenching. It cost me a lot, physically, emotionally. I put in 30 years, and then I have to say I quit, because it was actually because I lost my mother, and I kind of lost the will. I lost the will to fight, and that was in 2008, and that was when I hit 30 years. So thank you very much.